So, I recently watched Saltburn, and I have a lot to say about it. But to summarize, it's a bland, regressive, trite farce of a class commentary film made by a rich white lady. Regardless, it did make me wonder, why do rich people keep making movies critiquing other rich people? As you may know, the director of Saltburn is a woman by the name of Emerald Fennell. If her name doesn't give it away, guess what her sister's name is? It's Coco Fennell, and her father's name is Theodore Alistar Fennell, a name perfectly suited for a Bond villain. He also happens to be a jewelry mogul, even being known as the King of Bling. My point being that Fennell is rich, not just upper middle class, fully upper class. Her dad is a millionaire, and she is too. So how does her financial background influence her filmmaking? In a pretty clear way, it seems. Her films are tone-deaf social commentaries. She attempts to discuss serious social issues in a progressive and insightful way, yet the film's content is conservative and problematic. Her previous work, Promising Young Woman, blamed women for perpetuating rape culture, had excessive violence against women, and was borderline propaganda. In the description, I have an article about how Promising Young Woman fails sexual assault survivors. I can never do it justice, so you should read it yourself. The main takeaway pertaining to this video, however, is that the film panders to the interests of Hollywood. In a way, Hollywood's production and celebration of this movie makes them feel less shitty for their history of enabling sexual predators. No wonder the film received universal praise from Hollywood award shows. So how does Fennell grapple with class conflict in Saltburn? Well, similar to Promising Young Woman, Saltburn blames middle-class people for class conflict. I have a really hard time saying class conflict. Class conflict. Class conflict. But first, let's introduce the basic plot of the movie. The film centers around Oliver, a young, hyper-intelligent Oxford University student who feels outcast in a school predominantly composed of the ultra-wealthy. There, he meets Felix Catton, a tall, handsome man of aristocratic birth. The two become instant friends, and eventually Felix invites Oliver to his family estate, the titular Saltburn. While there, Oliver begins to insinuate himself into Felix's family, becoming a manipulative, calculated, evil character. Throughout the film, Fennell implements devil and angel imagery to depict Oliver and Felix respectively. Fennell's main thesis seems to be that middle and working class people are drawn to the appeal of wealth and will lose all sense of morality to attain it. Consequently, the critique resides on the middle class rather than the rich. It draws attention away from the wealthy and powerful. It makes the assumption that upper class people and middle to working class people have the same motivations and views on power and greed. It's a very cynical and conservative way of looking at the world. Emerald Fennell makes no attempt at denouncing a capitalist system, but rather implies that there's an inherent human nature which justifies and upholds the capitalist system. She does make efforts to villainize the rich Catton family, but in a very light way. There are multiple scenes where the Saltburn residents demean Oliver.
You have nothing to do with him, with us, with her. Nothing at all.
These remarks, however, are not depicted as the microaggressions the rich usually spout, but rather a caricature written by someone who's never experienced classism. Moreover, these remarks only serve Fennell's main thesis. Oliver and his socioeconomic class are blinded by jealousy for the rich. Miss Fennell, the average person doesn't envy the rich, we fucking hate them. To make it all worse, Saltburn thinks it's clever. The end has a montage making it seem like there was a huge, perfectly executed twist, but instead it was obvious from the start what was happening.
God, you really do notice everything, don't you?
It's not even a twist. The thing about Saltburn is it insists upon itself. Oh God, I just quoted Peter Griffin.
I did not care for The Godfather.
What?
Did not care for The Godfather.
But it's true. There's an ego to the film, which Fennell echoes in her interviews, which makes me double down on my disdain for the film. In another magazine, she was quoted as saying,
"Absurdity is a part of life. Therefore, any social construct we have, class being the foremost in our country, is completely absurd. And in general, I'm always going to be interested in sex and power at the center of everything. Those are the central tensions of all drama. Whether it's the dynamics between men and women, or between the class system, that's going to be fascinating forever."
There's a common defense of this movie that people spout, which seems completely invalidated by this quote. I've heard several times that it's not about class. Yeah, it is. She said it herself. Of course, I believe in the power of audience interpretation, but I find it dishonest to ignore the class commentary in this film. This quote also reflects just how deluded she is. She truly believes that she's made a movie exposing the absurdity of class. And in a way, she did. Saltburn exposes the absurdity of rich folks making movies about class inequality. In other words, she's the epitome of the absurdity which she so desperately wants to critique. Even on a formal level, Saltburn is an incredibly shallow film. Sure, it looks pretty, but there's nothing truly cinematic about it. Linus Sandgren did a wonderful job with the cinematography, and there are some objectively beautiful shots, but the film lets nothing sit with the viewer. Let the viewer appreciate it. Instead, the film ends up being superficially gorgeous, only impressive in screenshots and Twitter posts. I will say that the cast does a fantastic job, and I truly respect all they did for this film. I even respect Fennell for her direction of the cast. It's just everything else about the movie kinda sucks. But Emerald Fennell's certainly not the first privileged, aristocratic filmmaker fascinated with tearing down their own class. This tradition dates back to the golden age of film, namely two champions of European cinema, Jean Renoir and Louis Buñuel. Let's start with Jean Renoir. Renoir is a French director who made the highly influential Rules of the Game, what is often labeled as the European Citizen Kane. Rules of the Game was released in 1939 and is a pretty poignant satire of the bourgeoisie. Its main critique is the duplicitousness, immorality, and promiscuity of the rich. Essentially, it observes the absurdity of the rich's veneer of respectability. Formally, it's also considered a landmark film for its use of deep focus in camera movement. Deep focus refers to scenes where the background and foreground are in focus, creating immersive depth. Unlike Saltburn, Rules of the Game has a sincere critique of the wealthy, but just like Fennell, Renoir was born privileged. Renoir was the son of Pierre-Auguste Renoir, one of the key figures of the Impressionist art movement. Interestingly, Renoir was not raised by his parents, but his nanny, Gabrielle Renard, who was a cousin of his mother. Renard influenced his love for cinema. Renoir states that she taught me to see the face behind the mask and the fraud behind the flourishes. Imparted this wisdom upon young Renoir as it pertains to film and art, but there's also an alternative lesson of cynicism towards social and class conventions. Similar to Renoir, Louis Buñuel is a titan of film history. And just like Renoir, he spent a good portion of his film career satirizing the rich and powerful in spite of his background. Buñuel was born to an aristocratic father who got rich from selling guns and hardware in Cuba, and then settled back in Spain to a life of comfort and laziness. Buñuel would say of his father, "The fact of the matter is that my father did absolutely nothing." Buñuel, like Renoir, would therefore reject his own class background. Throughout his career, Buñuel would observe the shallowness, pretensions, and hypocrisy of the wealthy. For me, these filmmakers' class critiques still ring slightly hollow, but unlike Saltburn, they're made well. They only ring hollow because I know the director's background. I was still very critical of Saltburn's commentary before researching Fennell's background, and now knowing her background only confirms my critical feelings. And Saltburn is not the only modern, half-baked class commentary. As a matter of fact, these movies won't fucking stop. They just keep coming out. This all started with Parasite, a genuinely good movie in class commentary. Producers and studio heads have seen the critical and commercial success of Parasite and have decided to try to capitalize on the trend. We now have rich Hollywood executives profiting off the class rage of working class audiences. Let's quickly run through these class commentary movies for the past 4 years. A simple eat the rich movie that has little bite.
Hey, Hunger Games, I'm still full!
Actually pretty fun, but falls into the trap of claiming that rich and poor people would act the same if their situations were reversed. A pretty regressive take. Plus, it's pretty overindulgent and doesn't say as much as it thinks it does. Little commentary here, which is refreshing. Just kind of an entertaining horror flick. A Nepo baby-made horror movie about the hedonism of the rich, which tries to balance so many different themes and messages that instead absolutely collapses in upon itself. A movie that talks a lot, but doesn't say anything. So why? Because it's all about the bottom line in Hollywood. Moreover, the Hollywood circle jerk system loves to pat themselves on the back for making seemingly woke movies. And some of these are truly brain-numbing films. We're supposed to have catharsis from these movies, and then move on with our lives and never take charge and disrupt the status quo. there's only temporary catharsis because deep down, audiences know killing a couple rich fucks won't fix anything, but burning the whole system to the ground might help. Thank you for watching.